Hey, brand builder, Rory Vaden here. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this interview. As always, it's our honor to provide it to you for free. And wanted to let you know there's no big sales pitch or anything coming at the end. However, if you are someone who is looking to build and monetize your personal brand, we would love to talk to you and get to know you a little bit and hear about some of your dreams and visions and share with you a little bit about what we're up to see if we might be a fit. So if you're interested in a free strategy call with someone from our team, we would love to hear from you. You can do that at brandbuildersgroup.com/podcall, brandbuildersgroup.com/podcall. We hope to talk to you soon. If you've been listening to this show for any amount of time, you know that the National Speakers Association has been a huge part of my journey, was a huge part of my journey, especially early on as a speaker. And so I met Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and so many, of my personal mentors, Mark Sanborn, Eric Chester, David Avern. Well, there's a group that NSA has called the $1 Million Speakers Group that started a handful of years ago. And through that group, we got a chance, AJ and I, to meet a lot of the really sustainable businesses that have been run by speakers. So they were speakers that they turned their expertise into a business. And that's the man you're about to meet, Jim Doyle. I met Jim through that group. We've been friends for a lot of years now at this point. He's run a multi-million-dollar training company for years. And we've just known each other through that. And I've always admired him and looked up to him. One of the things that he did recently is he did an ESOP with some of his team and sold some of the ownership of his company back to his own team members, which is really, really a wonderful way to leave a legacy and something that you just don't hear that much about. But anyways, Jim has a book that just came out. It's called Selling with a Servant Heart, the 10 Lessons on the Path to Joy and Increased Income. And another thing, if you've been listening for a while, you know we almost never have people on here to talk about sales because we have a hard time finding people who we agree with in how they teach, selling. And we've got some really, really specific philosophies around selling that are pretty rare. But Jim is one of the guys that over time we've really come to adore and endorse. And we endorse this book. And so anyways, I wanted you to get a chance to meet him and learn from him alongside of me as I learned from him. So Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I have to laugh. Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Jim Doyle.
Yeah, there it is, man.
That's like I've arrived, to be even in the same sentence with those guys who are just legends and have impacted and taught so many people. I'll take it, but I don't think by any stretch of the imagination what those guys have done is amazing. So.
Well, and I tell you, but in all like just objectivity, it is a rare speaker who builds a multi-million-dollar enterprise that scales beyond themselves, that lasts, over a decade, that actually has a true wealth building component that's a transferable asset. It's really incredible. And so Jim, I want you started really, you tell us what you do. Like, tell us what the company is. Obviously the book is about selling. I want to hear that, but kind of talk to us about like how you started your career and grew the training company.
So I was always in the media business, in the radio and TV business. And like many entrepreneurs, I went broke in a deal in the early 90s. And I was like, okay, what the hell do I do now? But I had always loved training and speaking. So I started a company in 1992 called Jim Doyle Associates, our 30th year. It's now called JDA.media. So this is our 30th year. And over a period of time, and I really should emphasize it, over a period of time, it became, I think, the largest training company in the TV space for sure. And I think one of the lessons I learned in that process that maybe is helpful to folks that are trying to do that and trying to build a business is the line, there's riches and niches. I think if you look at many of the members of that $1 million group who have built big sustainable businesses, I think about our friend Roxanne Emmerich, who's done that in the banking space.
Yeah.
Who was the guy that we knew who was the guru of nursing homes and senior living centers, and so many of those people, Bert, people who'd done it in financial services. Bill Cates on a subject of referrals, who built big businesses by being more niche focused. And I think what that allows you to do is to provide more services than just a training experience, and then you move to the next company in the next marketplace down the road. Now you can do coaching programs, online programs, build more sustainable product businesses that give you more opportunities. So I think that's one of the lessons that we learned. There's riches and niches.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, and some of those folks, it's like they're not necessarily names you would recognize, like you might somebody who speaks in arenas full of people, but in terms of the equity value of an asset in a company that survives without them, they're huge and valuable and provide extraordinary wealth to the founder, and then also the people who come after them. So one of the things that I really think is cool about what you guys do. So you're when you say media and TV business, you're in media sales. You're
Right.
training. Your niche is training like advertising sales reps at like a local TV station to call on local businesses to sell ad time. Yeah.
Absolutely. So they're using the TV station's platform, and then now today increasingly using all of the digital platforms that are available that television station might have created or represent.
Interesting. And so are these like whatever, like your local News 4 kind of a thing, or
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had clients in Nashville. We have clients in, I think right now, 75 markets around the country. So and we're able to go out and actually make sales calls side by side with their team members with just a whole file cabinet of ideas that we've learned from traveling all over the country. So we're the king of stolen ideas. we steal an idea in Nashville and sell it in Austin for a profit. That's and hopefully for the benefit of the business owner that gets some expertise that they might not have been able to get under normal circumstances.
Well, and I think, you said like tongue in cheek, but that is really rare. What you guys do is I love this. You don't only just teach people how to do it, you kind of do it alongside them. Like your team actually goes on sales calls with them, shows them in real time, like how to apply the concepts and the techniques you're teaching. Yeah.
Well, it's so correct. And I'll give you an example. I mean, so when you were kind enough to allow me to interview you for the book, and AJ as well, and you talked about something that was a big takeaway for me, because it crystallized. You said it in a way that I didn't, that made it clear when you talked about acute listening. So we teach, as most, I think, effective sales trainers teach, as most business owners should probably embrace, a technique of doing a lot of diagnosis before you present ideas. And so when we go out on a sales call with a salesperson in a market, their idea of listening may be 3 questions before they start talking about advertising. How's your business? How's the market right now? Oh, what are you doing for advertising? So the behavior that they model with our people is, a 30, 40-minute conversation that's all about them, about the customer's business, their challenges, their issues. Nobody wants to buy advertising. Almost they want to buy the things that advertising can do for them, whether it's solving a problem, dealing with a competitive threat, taking advantage of an opportunity in the marketplace. So that whole idea of understanding what the customer really wants is foundational to anybody who wants to be effective in sales, whether that's a consultant, a business owner, or a salesperson at a TV station.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think that that's super cool that you actually do the sales calls with them. To your point about the niches, it's also like, if you're serving a vertical, you can do it. Like if you worked in that vertical for years, it, the game, the people, the lingo, all the, the normal objections, etc. You can do that kind of depth of service that someone that just says, I teach sales training for everybody. It doesn't mean it's bad, but they can't do it to that level of detail.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the more you know about the category, the more you also understand what the needs are in that category. So you can adapt or create new products based upon what an opportunity is that may be a new opportunity just in the last year caused by the pandemic. So I'm a big believer in going deep rather than wide. Deeper rather than wide has at least served us well. Of course, now I'm writing a book to go and go wider, but violating all my own advice. But I think it served me well for a long time.
Well, and I would say, so the way that we teach it, we call it Sheehans Wall. And I don't know if you ever heard us talk about this. We named this after Peter Sheehan, who you probably know.
Oh, I know Peter, of course, yeah.
We kind of took one of Sheehan's models that he created for sort of like the corporate space, and we apply it to personal branding, saying that the way you break through the wall is by becoming known for one thing in one space. But then once you break through the wall, then you can expand into other things after you have a team and you have money and you have resources and experience. And I think you're a great example of that. So let's talk about selling with a servant heart. There's no shortage of books written about sales. Certainly not at this point. So why the need to write this, and what do you think is distinct or different about this philosophy compared to, what other stuff people may have read or heard about sales?
So if you Google sales books and you look at the titles, it's things like closing, winning. I got to tell you, I don't think that great salespeople think about winning in the same way that maybe that's the literature. And so I quite honestly get offended by a lot of what I read. And more than that, I get scared because we have a lot of great salespeople, people who could be great, who are being taught that this is the way to do it. And if you sell in that way, maybe you'll have some success. But I don't believe that you're going to find the joy that you can have in the long-term career in sales that you get when you put your primary focus on serving people. When I interviewed AJ, who, by the way, you told me was the best salesperson in your family, and one of the best you've ever seen.
AJ is the best. She is.
She's amazing.
Hands down. And I'd say this, separate to being my wife, like we worked together, for years.
Right.
He is the best salesperson, hands down, that I've ever seen.
And I would agree after having spent an hour on the phone interviewing her. But she said, when you make your customers' needs more important than your own needs. Well, in order to do that, you've got to believe that if it's good for the customer, it's ultimately going to be good for you, even though that might not be the case immediately. But if it's good for the customer, it will ultimately be good for you. And so, and good, I mean, the first word of this, the book title is selling. This is not a relationship book. This is not a book to help you feel, kinder in general. This is a book about being more effective in selling, more effective at getting, growing your business. But how do you grow your business? The more you serve, the more you get back. The more you give, the more you get back. There's a guy that I interviewed in the book, Dave Wall. Dave, if he was an RV dealership, he'd probably be the biggest in the country. He sells these $2 million coaches, these beautiful motorhome coaches, $2 million, $2 million. One of his customers, who was an old client of mine, said, "You got to talk to this guy." And his customer said, "This guy took a phone call from me. I had an issue with my coach. He took a phone call from me. In the course of the conversation, I said, 'Where are you?' And he said, 'Well, I'm on a family vacation in Argentina.' And he was on a satellite phone somewhere in Argentina. And my friend said, I was astounded he took that call. So I asked Dave about it, and he said, I took 5 minutes out of my time to help a customer. Well, how is Dave won? 60% of Dave Wall's business is repeat. 60%. 30% of his business is referral. If you build relationships like Dave has, you start every year at such a high level of productivity that you're going to be an award winner. You're going to be a high performance salesperson, all because you've had a commitment to customers. So, the idea that, we're going to win or that we're going to close, you know what? I think selling is a lot more about the way you are as a person and a lot less about the words you use. And so that's hopefully a focus of what I hope to accomplish by doing this book.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really cool way to think about it. Like if you're just cold calling randomly, every year you start on zero with a whole bunch of people you got to cold call. If you're building relationships, then you come into that year basically with an army of people that are helping generate leads for you because they've all had this wonderful experience. That's a cool way of thinking about it.
I think it's building relationships, but it's also building trust. The currency of relationships. I have a lot of salespeople that I like. I have a lot fewer that I trust. And being trusted is the pathway to really having deep, honest business conversations. But I was thinking about one of the biggest takeaways I had from doing this whole book. So I interviewed 35 people in all different industries. And so you and AJ were part of that group, but I talked to the guy who had oversaw ticket sales for the NBA and a mortgage broker who did probably 10 times the volume of a top performing mortgage broker. And as I reflected on all these conversations, one of the things I realized is, man, there is a scary, real important thing. So it's like to be trusted has a lot of responsibility. I mean, one of the guys that I interviewed said, you can't try with people's money. You can't try. You've got to do. And so there's a responsibility of trust so it's getting the relationship of trust, but then, honoring that by being so good at the solutions you bring that you continue to just build on that foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you think to move this to the tactical, right? So if you buy into this sort of philosophically going, okay, I'm building relationships, I'm earning trust, I'm doing what's in my customer's interest, beyond ultimately than what is just in my own. What are some of the things that should show up tactically, or what are the things that we can do or say inside of, how we prospect or how we, qualify or ask questions? I mean, what comes to mind in terms of the actual expression of how to do this in terms of selling with a servant's heart?
That's a great question. I think that there are differences that servant heart sellers have in every part of the sales process. I'll give you, Justin Gurney was the guy that I talked about who oversaw ticket sales. He worked for the NBA, National Basketball Association. So his job was to work with all 30 basketball teams to bring best practices on ticket sales and suite sales and, the expensive sponsorship kinds of things. He said the model has historically been a model of, make a bunch of phone calls, sit on the phone all day and call business owners. Rory, you've probably gotten those calls from, one of the Nashville teams. I've gotten them from the teams down in Sarasota, the Tampa teams. Now they'll make the phone calls slightly more sophisticated because they'll wait for the open the email before they then call you. But it's the 100 calls a day kind of situation. He said he found on every single team that there were outliers, one or two people on a team, all of these 30 teams that did it differently. They focused on building a relationship. They spent a lot of time, if you want the specifics of tactics, they spent a lot of time, more time than any of their colleagues on learning about why you might use those tickets. What are the business issues that you're trying to solve? What can an entertainment experience do to enhance your customer relationships? And guess who were the top performers in every one of those teams? Mm-hmm. So fast forward a few years, Justin joins the New Jersey Devils hockey team, running their efforts, and he tries to hire a team of outliers. And he tries to hire a team and teach a culture that is very focused on diagnosis, to your word, and into acute listening, really paying attention to what the answers are, listening longer and in more focus than 95% of all the sellers do. That's probably the number one skill that I think sets apart servant heart sellers.
Is the listening
And
like the volume,
listen,
like the quantity of time for how long they're listening?
exactly. I think that most salespeople spend about 20% of their time listening and 70, 80% of their time pitching. Servant heart sellers spend 70 to 80% of their time listening and 20 to 30% of their time presenting. They can present for a lot less time because when they present a solution, they nail it. It's done really understanding what the customer's issues are.
What are they listening for? I mean, yeah, I guess that's my biggest, so what are they listening for? Is it a standard set of questions they're asking, or um
Well, I think that there's going to be questions that an insurance salesperson might ask that a realtor wouldn't, or that a manufacturer, somebody selling manufacturing might ask that somebody else would. But the general principle to think about is I want to ask questions that have deep business conversations to try to uncover what is the customer potentially need, or how could they use the product that you sell in a way that solves their problems, not yours. You want to make a sale, that's your problem. They want to solve a particular issue within their business. So in Justin's case, by having those kinds of conversations, now they get to the pandemic. Well, you think, if you're listening to this thing and you think your business had trouble, how'd you like to be a professional hockey team? Shut down. Your building's not even open. Nobody can come. At one point, I talked to him and they had no idea when they were going to even reopen. And yet they were still making sales and renewing deals because they were having the kind of conversations about how you could use that suite, how you could use those tickets after the season started again. Other teams were laying off their people. The New Jersey Devils kept theirs on and continued to find some impact. Now, come out the other side. Who do you think is going to do the best? Who's going to have the greatest impact? There are other specifics. I mean, one of the other specific things that I really took away from this is the idea that in your presentations, the servant heart sellers tend to teach and not sell. Mm. So rather than here's the greatest thing that you can do, they'll spend a lot of time talking about what this product is going to do for your business. What is the problem it's going to solve? The only guy I interviewed who had ever called on me, I interviewed him because he just impressed me so much 25, 30 years ago. And he went on to oversee sales for Arbitron, which is a big ratings company that did ratings for all radio stations in America. He said their most successful salespeople were people who started as trainers and then moved into sales. So customer would buy a product and they would train them how to use it. So when they moved into sales, that was their default. Here's this new thing. Let me show you how this could make your station look good. And they had the highest performance across a whole sales staff of a bunch of people than people who were just coming in and trying to sell. Teach, not sell became something I really took away from the interviews that I thought was significant.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the other thing about that's a powerful idea that you also kind of get the benefit of seeing what you do being applied to people in real life and then going to talk to a prospect. Like I was thinking about our team of strategists, how their conviction goes up when they actually come through the training or work with our clients and see how they apply it, and then they get a sense of it. It helps them go out and have more conviction and clarity about what they're selling to. And then to what you're saying, it's like it's more of a teacher's heart than a commission breath salesperson kind of a thing.
Well, also those stories not only help their own belief, but they conveyed correctly can also help their customers' belief, their prospects' belief.
Mm-hmm. So what are the things that you find, how do you think this applies specifically to personal brands? There's, we have a one of our members only events is called Pressure Free Persuasion, and so there's a time where we start talking about this sort of tactical one-on-one selling. But like, where do you think, like, even as you just look at your own career, you think back of going, here's where I had to sell and learn how to sell in order to build the business that I have. You've got, how do you think that this, like today, a lot of times when people think personal brands, it's almost more like they think marketing, right? You're doing videos and social media and funnels and writing books and, even speaking from stage. But those skill sets, I think, are pretty markedly different from the ability to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody and, discuss their needs and eventually move them to make a decision and give you a credit card or send you a check. So how do you think this applies, sales still applies to personal brands?
Well, ultimately, no matter how strong a brand I've built, I have to sit on a Zoom call, be in front of a prospect or a potential client, and have a one-on-one conversation. As you asked the question, I was thinking about, you and I probably both had the experience of being with a lot of very successful speakers, very effective speakers, guys who have built great personal brands. But when you spend time with them one-on-one, they have a very, very hard time losing the spotlight. They have a very hard time not being on stage. So as a consequence, they tend to want to dominate the conversation. And, I understand that, probably been guilty of that more than a few times myself. But it's the opposite when you take your marketing. So my marketing is, I'm out there, here's my content. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's the messages that I'm sending out to the marketplace. Well, now somebody engages with me. I've got to just say, what are the issues that you're trying to accomplish? And I've got to turn off my ego. That's the hardest thing, is turning off my ego, that desire to be special, that desire to be a star, and really listen acutely to what somebody's trying to accomplish. And then I can try to figure out, all right, what is it that I do that can best serve them?
Mm-hmm. The part about this listening thing, which is crazy, is, like the way I was taught on sales was just what we're talking about. It's all a numbers game, and you just keep going no matter what, and you're just burning through people. And, kind of this, when they say this, you say this, and you got to gear yourself up and, kind of like be persistent until they buy, kind of a conversation. And
They have my money. They've got my money. I'm going to get my money.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're holding my money. I have to get my
Yeah.
money out of their pockets. Yeah. And that's so hard. Like for the salesperson, like emotionally, it's like that's a lot of pressure. What's so crazy to me about asking questions is like it's so much easier. Like people tell you, rather than having to like gear yourself up and say, okay, I'm going to go spew a bunch of stuff at somebody and not shut up until they acquiesce. It's like I can sit back and do nothing while they tell me exactly what it is that they need. And they like lay out this roadmap for exactly what they need to hear and tell you how to like make a sale.
Right. And if you spend just 15 or 20 minutes on Google before you make that call, looking at the business issues in that category, trying to find out some of the competitive issues that are going on, spending a few minutes on their website so your questions are not just how's business or what's going on in your business, but rather lead to more in-depth business conversations. They'll tell you everything. And they tell you everything because such few people do that. And that becomes a competitive advantage. It's interesting as we have this conversation that I am more focused on listening, or I've talked a lot about listening, but listening also has a partner, and that's good questions. It's you can't just listen. Did you watch the game? What do you think about the Titans? How's your business? I mean, blah, 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 blah. No, I want to be able to engage in a business conversation. So and when an organization does it, I know you have a ton of entrepreneurs who follow the podcast and follow your work. And I had a banker, and this is a banker who took this into his entire bank's culture. Rather than call his people commercial lenders, they called them commercial bankers. And they were instructed to have business conversations, trained, taught, drilled to have business conversations with every prospect. Where do you see the future of your business? Do you have anybody identified who might be a buyer for this company down the road? They're trying to look at the longer term business issues so that they can help this business owner orient his business to that and provide perhaps the capital to do all of those things. Unbelievable loyalty, less pressure on rates for borrowings, because I'll pay a little bit more for that degree of service if I'm trying to borrow money for something. And when the pandemic hit, and this bank, Landmark Bank in Kansas, could fulfill PPP loans in a hurry when the big banks couldn't do anything, they got hundreds of customers who are now extraordinarily loyal to the bank. So this whole idea of asking good questions is a partner with listening, has to be.
Mm-hmm. And the questions you're trying to ask there are, how do you know what questions to ask? I mean, one is to do the research. It's funny you mentioned this. So one of the recent interviews we did was Sam Richter about, I don't know if you know Sam.
Exactly, I know Sam, yeah.
All the customer intelligence and the online research stuff that he uses, which is
brilliant. He does good stuff.
So once that, is kind of educating yourself on some of the industry dynamics, maybe the company dynamics, et cetera. What are the other triggers or things that we're paying attention to, or how do we reverse engineer and come up with the right kind of questions?
I'm listening in every business conversation, obviously for opportunity, for problems. So I'll give you one specific technique. I learned this from a guy who was a producer on a 60 Minutes type of interview show. And he said, and this goes to your comment in our interview about acute listening. He said, when they would do an interview, they would train reporters that after the person answered the question, to not immediately jump in with another question. He said, pause. Don't fill up the space. Nature abhors a vacuum, and most people will start speaking. And he said, we would get the most compelling soundbite, the most interesting piece, the less rehearsed idea after the pause. So people would have the rehearsed answer, but then they'd give you maybe something really honest. And if I hear that really honest bit of pain or problem, then you keep asking a few more questions to see, is this going to be something that might create an opportunity? It's the understanding that whatever business you're in, the customer is not buying that. They're buying what that can do for their business, how that can solve a problem and or take advantage of an opportunity. So that's the kind of listening that I have to be able to do to understand what are their needs.
I love it. I love it. Well, Jim Doyle is the author. Selling with a Servant Heart is the book. Longtime friend. Check this out. Jim, where else do you want people to go if they want to connect with you and learn more about what you're doing? And heck, if you're trying to sell some media stuff, you're the guy for sure.
So LinkedIn, Facebook for sure. Love to connect with folks on LinkedIn. And there is a specific website for the book, which is servantsellingbook.com. Love to see people there. And Roy, I can't tell you how grateful I am for the opportunity to do this. I have such admiration and respect for you and what you built. And so this is an honor for me. I had the privilege of interviewing you when you brought out Take the Stairs. And so I was thinking today, what an honor to get to do the reverse. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, of course, man. It's our pleasure. And you won over AJ's heart with your interview, and then all the information about Maine and the lobsters and everything is just really, 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 really wonderful. So
we still have to have lobsters on the coast of Maine sometime. So.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
she is convinced that we are going there at some point soon. So I'm sure
Okay.
we'll see. I'm sure you'll be the first call we make.
Thank you.
All the best, my friend.
Thank you.